All righty, if we can take our seats and get started back up so we can try to get, well, we're not going to be on time, but get under control. So we have two initiative concepts to present to you today. The first is from Fred Tyson on epitranscriptomics, crosstalks, and toxicants, or EPCOT. Fred?
Okay, thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. We've heard a lot about multi-omics types of analyses and projects and programs all over the last 2 days, and I'm going to continue in that vein. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share this concept clearance with you, as crosstalks between the epitranscriptome and epigenome have been something that's been on my mind, I guess, since about 4 years ago. In 2019, I was at a conference in Chicago, at the University of Chicago, and was able to hear a presentation on that described how M6A modifications on mRNA transcripts could actually regulate histone modifications and also gene transcription. And at this time, this was actually an unknown or previously unknown mechanism for gene regulation in mammalian cells. I also began to think this could be really a future direction we could pursue with the environmental epitranscriptomics portfolio that we support at NAEHS, as none of these omics systems are actually operating independently. There's coordination between the genome and the epigenome, and certainly one could predict there's going to be coordination between the epitranscriptome as well as the epigenome. So over the next few minutes, what I'm going to do is give you I'm going to give you an overview of epitranscriptomics. For some folks, that might be an introduction. For some, it might be a review. But I'm going to keep it at the 30,000-foot level. We'll go through that, and then I want to describe a little bit about our growing environmental epitranscriptomics portfolio here at NAEHS. And after I do that, then I'll delve right into the crosstalks component of the presentation. Okay, epitranscriptomics is the study of reversible chemical modifications of RNA transcripts, which entails modifying RNA bases much in the same manner that's going to be reminiscent or analogous to what happens with the epigenome, where you have readers, writers, and erasers that install, remove, or recognize these chemical modifications. Currently, we know that there are two different a little faster than I want to. Okay. We know that there are two different, there are 172 chemical modifications that are currently listed, with more than 60 occurring in eukaryotes. What we don't know a lot is about the abundance, distribution, and function of most of them. But we do know quite a bit actually about the M6A modification, which is the best characterized one in mammalian cells, and we know a bit about the readers, writers, and eraser complexes that are associated with that, as well as the function. We also know that there have been several other modifications that have been extensively mapped in epitranscriptomes, and that would include the M1A, pseudouridine, M6AM, NM4AC, as well as some others. So since I told you the M6A is what's we know a bit about that, I want to spend a little bit of time, or a couple of minutes, really kind of going over the M6A modification complex, as well as some of the functions that this modification has on transcripts within cellular regulation. M6A let me see if I can use this pointer correctly without advancing the slides. I think it's the center button, right? Is the pointer? The top one, okay. So got you. I think I did it right, but we'll see. Okay, I have seen. Okay, the M6A methylation is actually catalyzed, and I guess I'm not really being able to point. Gotcha. Okay, it's actually catalyzed by this writer complex, which key components of this complex are the metal 3 and metal 14, but it can also have metal 16 in it, and there are a number of other proteins that can be associated that will ascribe different functions. The M6A modification is removed by RNA demethylases, which one is the FTO demethylase. you see there at the bottom in the green, that actually, the discovery of that and publication by Chuanha back in 2010 really kind of moved this field forward in terms of folks learning more about epitranscriptomics. There's also a dioxygenase ALK-BH5 that is also one of the demethylases that removes this modification. And then there are a number of different reader proteins. These include YTH, DF1, 2, and 3, you see out in the cytosol, as well as YTH-DC1, and there are a couple of other ones that are also located on here. What these readers do is you can assign different function to this M6A modification by telling which reader is associated with it. They're involved in microRNA biogenesis as well as mRNA splicing. They can be involved in exist-mediated X chromosome inactivation, as well as translocation of transcripts from the nucleus to the cytoplasm. They can be involved in the cytoplasm and taking the transcripts to ribosomes for translation, or they can tag they can read the tag, the M6A on there, and take them off for degradation, or they can enhance stability. There are a number of different functions that this M6A modification has in cellular regulation. So why do we care anything about epitranscriptomics at all? Okay, well, there are over 100 diseases that we know, human diseases, that have perturbations in epitranscriptomic processes. That would include with readers, the modification marks being in different places that they might not appropriately supposed to be in, they shouldn't be in, or you could have dysfunction with readers, writers, or erasers. But we have them in a number of different cancers, metabolic disorders, pathologies that are associated with aging, as well as developmental disorders. And many of these diseases we know have environmental components. Moreover, we have environmental health science investigators are becoming increasingly aware of the potential of exposures or toxicants to have impacts on the deposition, recognition, or removal of these modifications and what their role may be in disease. So to that end, I guess about 5 years ago, we had actually two RFAs, one for R01s and one for R21s. But in 2018, we basically had no grants in the NAEHS portfolio that were focused on epitranscriptomics. I can tell you now, 5 years later, with that RFA, we funded 5 R01s and 4 R21s, but we actually have a total now of 40 grants in this area. It is something that has grown rapidly, and we're looking at a number of things. Our investigators are looking at a diversity of exposures, as well as the diversity of health outcomes, different modifications, as you can see, and then the impacts that these things may have on readers, writers, or erasers of the modifications. They're asking questions like, what is the consequence of having, or what is the mechanism of reshaping the epitranscriptome by M6A? What is the mechanism that's associated with M6A being put in places inappropriately as a consequence of exposure? Or again, what is the consequences of RNA methylation on neurodegenerative or neurodevelopmental types of disorders? So these are just a few of the questions, but as you can see, the portfolio is really growing. We get applications every round, and it's some of them do well, some of them don't, but the portfolio is growing. I think from 0 to 40 in 5 years is pretty astonishing to me. So in light of this, how this field is growing so rapidly, or how this portfolio is growing so rapidly, we wanted to think about how might we influence the evolution of the field. How can we, direct some new directions it might take? And that's actually where this crosstalk comes into play. And what do we mean by crosstalks? Specifically, I mean by crosstalks, that's going to be an interaction or communication between an epitranscriptomic process and an epigenomic process. And these things happen between the readers, erasers, and writers of code. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. With the writers, you can have These writers can actually change modifications of M6A on histone modifying enzyme transcripts. And when that happens, you change actually chromatin accessibility and thereby affect gene transcription or gene expression profiles. You can also have a binding of the metal 14 component of the writer complex that can bind directly to a specific histone modification and bring the whole writer complex in close proximity to nascent transcripts on nucleosomes and actually then deposit the M6A modification on these elongating RNA transcripts. With the erasers, I have one example up here specifically with a link RNA where the M6A modification is removed from this link RNA. The link RNA then serves as a scaffold on chromatin that is able to recruit EZH2 that can then methylate the promoter for P21 and reduce P21 expression through an epigenetic mechanism of methylating that promoter. We also have several examples where the readers can be involved in these types of crosstalks, where again the YTHDC1 can bind to the BRD4 protein and promote or facilitate the formation of transcriptional condensates. It can also bind to modified chromatin-associated regulatory or CAR RNAs, tagging them for degradation, bringing down the level of that expression of those types of transcripts, and decreasing chromatin accessibility and therefore reducing gene expression profiles. And it can also, this reader can also bind to another specific histone modification, and through interactions with its particular lysine demethylase, it can also demethylate that promoter and then thereby regulate gene expression. So what I've told you about are some examples of different types of crosstalks that are occurring, but I haven't given you anything with any type of exposure context. So to do that now, I'd like to introduce some work that's been done by Victor Cortez that was published this past December in NAEHS. And I really just want you to look at the upper three panels, A, B, and C. What this is a model of is BPA exposure to pregnant females results in obesity. Not in the F1 generation, but when you cross the F1s to each other, you see this obesity in the F2 generation. And what these slides or what these figures are up here are representations of mean body weights of 10-week-old males. And we're seeing along the x-axis the different generations. So when there's been an ancestral exposure in these subsequent F2 through F6 generation, you see this obesity as measured by mean body weight in these males. In this panel A, also panel B is pretty much showing the same data represented a different way. And panel C shows the mean body weights as we're going through age up to 10 weeks. Excuse me, my mouth has got kind of dry. This obesity phenotype is a result of overconsumption of food. These animals, the mice, they just eat too much, and that's why they get obese. It tracks with it actually tracks with a functional element, a response element or an enhancer in an intron of the FTO gene. The FTO gene is what I told you was an RNA demethylase and an eraser of epitranscriptomic marks, or M6A actually. So you have this enhancer element that there's a deletion in there that's tracking with this. I should also tell you that BPA demethylates this enhancer region, and it has a CTCF binding site. So what you have is, in the absence of BPA, you have the FTO, and then you have these genes LRX or LRX3 or LRX5 that are much further downstream on the same chromosome. When there's been an ancestral exposure to BPA, what happens is this cis-regulatory element within the FTO gene becomes demethylated. CTCF preferentially binds to unmethylated DNA. So the CTF is recruited to this enhancer in the FTO gene, And that, when you have that change in methylation with a CTF binding site, you have the potential to impact long-range interactions between that functional element and other functional elements in the genome. What is actually happening is when that CTCF is bound to that enhancer element, it interacts long range with the promoters of either the LRX or LRX3 or LRX5 genes. Those genes are involved in the differentiation of appetite controlling genes in the hippocampus. And what happens is you get that long range interaction and you get an increase in the level of transcripts of LRX3 and LRX5, and then that is shown as a phenotype where these animals are obese. Now, they haven't really worked out what happens in the 7th generation, but that interaction does not track through the 7th generation, F7. You don't see it anymore, and we don't know exactly why that is. What they also did was look at another set of animals where there was a deletion in that CTCF binding site. And even though in the presence of an ancestral exposure of BPA, you did not get that looping interaction between the FTO and the LRX5 and LRX5 genes, LRX3 and LRX5 genes, and you did not see the obesity phenotype. So I think what we have here is some fairly good suggestive data that there's a mechanism for this paternal transmission of obesity phenotypes through this mechanism that has the FTO enhancer demethylated recruiting CTCF and then having the long-range interaction with the promoters of the LRX3 and LRX5 genes that then results in this obesity phenotype. This is the only published data that I've been able to come across so far, but through progress reports, I told you we have lots of grants in this area now. Through some progress reports, I also have, the data hasn't been published yet, but it will be soon, that also UV as well as hexavalent chromium can also cause perturbations in these crosstalk interactions that happen, and they are associated with phenotypes, but because this isn't published, I don't really want to talk more about that. So I think hopefully I've given you, it's really been over these last 5 years where a lot of this crosstalk publications have been, and retrospectively, I probably could have put a table together to just give you an idea of how many there are, because there are certainly a lot. And this is a phenomenon that is real. It's not something that, is an artifact. This is something that's real. And the fact that we see it with BPA and certainly with some other toxicants really kind of smells like an opportunity to me. And what would that opportunity be? Okay, the opportunity really is to develop a solicitation that's going to look at multiple levels of omics. Okay, we're going to look at the epitranscriptome and the epigenome for sure, at least minimally. Utilize these multi-omics platforms. We want to elucidate mechanisms. We don't just want to see that there's crosstalk, but we want to understand the mechanisms of these crosstalks, and then how are they then involved in disease etiology or progression. I think this actually is a good interface for the precision environmental health and exposomics that we've been hearing about over the last couple of days. When you think about, again, how you can look at these multi-omics platforms as well as integrated analyses to try to get at mechanisms and have a better understanding of things that are going on with environmentally or toxicant-induced diseases. So at this point, what I'd like to do is acknowledge other folks in DIRT who have contributed to this concept, and they're listed there. I won't read their names. And in the interest of time, I'd like to go ahead and turn this over to the two council reviewers that were identified and agreed to do this, Drs. Karen Vasquez and Gokhan Mutlu, and excuse me, whichever one of y'all would like to go first.
I've been really excited about this. So when Fred asked me to review this, I said, oh, do you want it like a critique, like a grant review? He said, no, just say a few words. But as I read his concept, it was so exciting, and now hearing you talk about it again, I think this is a really novel area. It's an area that's completely understudied. But I wanted to add one thing on top of what Fred already told you, is that RNA modifications have not been that well, they've been known for a long time, they've not been well studied in their function. And as with DNA and RNA, any modification, we're talking about methyl groups here, but can change the structure of the RNA, can change the structure of the DNA, and as everyone knows, at least I teach in my first year class for graduate students, DNA, RNA structure is function. So it's not the sequence that matters, it's the structure that leads to function. And so I think that's another added layer that you should include here because that's really exciting. And we're thinking about crosstalks. So think about RNA, DNA. One perfect example is an R loop. So we all know about R loops, right, that occur during transcription and replication, can cause collisions, can cause breaks, genetic instability. I think this concept it's important and timely. It's really timely. I think this is great, Fred, what you put together. I think it has the potential for really high impact findings because of the novelty and because of the functions that we're learning about to tie together environmental exposures, gene function, and disease etiology. And one thing we've been talking about this whole meeting is bringing all of this together and understanding mechanisms. We have good data in, good data out, that kind of thing. This, I think, I think it's really brilliantly done, Fred. So I was going to talk about weaknesses and I couldn't find any. So what I will say is, though, in this concept, I think it fits in with all of the multi-omics we've been talking about, obviously, right? It fits in with that. And also ties in, as Fred mentioned, with your initiative in 2018 to build upon this. So I think that this is a great addition to that and keep the momentum going. And finally, I would just like to add one suggested addition is to look at the structures as well in function and with the DNA, too. So I study alternative DNA structures, and we found that they are mutagenic on their own in the absence of damage. Modifications like methylation can change them, their positioning with histones, et cetera, but they can lead to genetic instability that's clearly involved in cancer etiology by looking at large databases of human genomes. I think it's really important, and it would fit perfectly in with this as well. So I would suggest that addition. And finally, I have a question. When will this start, and how long will it last? Really excited about it. So that's my input, Fred. And stop laughing down there. I'm excited about this. This is great. Yeah, I love it.
Well, thank you for those comments. In terms of the questions, I can't answer that question. Well, I can't answer the question at all. That's above my pay grade. Somebody else is going to have to answer the when. I would do it tomorrow if allowed, but that's something that's we can ask that question, but let's let Dr. Mutlu go ahead and.
I agree with Dr. Vasquez's statement. I think it's a very important and interesting area. I would say our understanding of epigenetics will be incomplete without the study of epitranscriptomics. And if we don't understand the RNA modifications, what we know about DNA modifications or histone modifications will not be sufficient in terms of our understanding in general. And we know the environment affects our DNA, and there's a lot of emphasis on epigenetics and how the environment affects the epigenome. We need to also pay attention to the RNA modifications. And you bring up another thing. It's a relatively newer area in epigenetics that makes it even more exciting. I think we learned a lot with Chuan's findings, but I think it's probably incomplete. There's probably going to be more discoveries made in this field. But you bring up an additional layer of complexity. How does how do the writers, erasers that regulate epitranscriptome may also regulate DNA, the histone modifications, etc., as you mentioned. So I think the field is new, and I think it's very exciting, and thanks for proposing this. I'll be very supportive of that.
Thank you.
So with the novelty of this, is there a sufficient applicant pool that can study the environment interaction with these mechanisms? Are there enough people that know what they're doing?
I would argue that there are. One of the ways that we built the actual current portfolio as it is now was, frankly speaking, or I'll be candid, we certainly talked to Chuan Ha, who is considered, he's one of the folks that's considered to be the father of epitranscriptomics. And he had actually been working with Dr. Mutlu as well as Dr. Yu Ying Ha at the University of Chicago. And so he'd had some persuasion to begin looking at environmental exposures. And we got him to do that, and we have him in his portfolio now. There's also Sami Jaffrey at Cornell, who was the other person that's considered the father of epitranscriptomics. We have him in the portfolio as well. He actually approached us about an R21 a few years ago that we weren't able to support, but they've come in since, and we are able to support him. There are a number of investigators, and I could mention another one, Chi Chen, who's at the University of Utah, who was doing this work in the absence of exposure, and we asked him about add some exposures in, and he's done that as well with arsenic and high-fat diets. Then we have folks like Yu Ying Ha, who've been long-standing environmental health science investigators in metal toxicology and skin cancer, and she embraced epitranscriptomics. A number of people, Yinqing Wang, I could think of, Tom Begley up in Albany has been doing this for years. And so we have a bolus of folks at Pete Dedons and someone else I should mention. There are just a number of folks who are already working kind of in this area. And I mentioned a couple of folks that have found some of this crossover that I note in progress reports. There were some others that I didn't bring up that are doing. So there are people that are doing this and finding this. It's a matter of getting folks who are not using exposures to do it, to add some exposure element, and obviously bring the expertise. They'll have to get some type of toxicological expertise on the team to do that. But then there are going to be folks, again, who are already in the portfolio, who have the capacity to do this, who are doing it but aren't doing it in a targeted way, or have been, kind of serendipitously discovered that this is something that's happening. So yes, I believe there's a significant applicant pool to generate a critical mass. And I think further on, we put an RFA out there. We'll get several applications. We'll fund a handful, but the other ones will keep coming in. And that's basically what happened 5 years ago, and that's how we got to the number we're at now.
Yeah, so I think Karen wants to react to this, and then Daryl had a
Yeah,
comment
I'll
as
just
well.
jump in really quick. I would just say one thing I think that's really nice about an RFA is it does bring people that aren't just those people in the field. It brings people from outside, and it brings in collaboration. So, for example, if somebody is an RNA expert, DNA expert, and then they interact with an environmental, person, they can with exposures. It really, I think the RFA brings that together because somebody might not think about that, but it's within their abilities to do those research, the research focus to follow through on that, which brings new ideas and new collaboration. So I think it's great.
The other thing that happens with that also is Leroy was not in the room right now, but Leroy usually puts the reviews together for these, and he gets really outstanding reviewers. These reviewers come in and say, "Oh, geez, I wish I had known about this before." And what happens is they end up submitting unsolicited applications, and again, you get folks in there. So I'm not concerned about there being a pool of folks that can do this at all.
I believe there's a lot of interest in epitranscriptomics in cancer, and people are developing inhibitors for the erasers. So there's also potential therapeutic application if a mechanistic link can be found.
Daryl.
I was just going to ask if I see some of the disease states on your slides, Dr. Tyson, the neurodevelopment and autism and developmental disorders. That certainly would be extremely exciting from the standpoint of cross-IC collaboration. Let's say NINDS, and EHS. Yes.
In terms of other ICs, I've actually been in contact. One of David's slides, he talked about the cancer environmental work group that I think Kim has really been had a lot to do with putting that together. And Kim asked me to come talk about this to that group. And program staff from NCI are very interested in participating in this. We actually have a commitment from NIA program staff. They can't do a set aside, but they can join and then pick up funding if we put this out and get grants. And then also there are partners at Human Genome that also have expressed interest in potential partnering with this as well. So there's this crosstalk as well, if you would, that's going on.
Trevor?
I'm wondering if you've given any consideration to carbon-1 metabolism, because carbon-1 metabolism is required for the production of S-adenosylmethionine, which is the principal methyl donor, and it's affected also by folic acid. So I think there's a dietary component to this that might be very important. I'm
sorry, I did not hear the first part of what you said.
I said the principal methyl donor is S-adenosylmethionine, and to make that you need a methyl group, and that methyl group comes from folic acid, which gives a link to the diet. So I'm wondering if you're thinking about including the diet in the RFA.
Certainly, typically we don't consider diet as part of RFAs, but people could think about putting in high-fat diets in conjunction with something else, or these low-protein diets. We found out actually a lot about transgenerational inheritance from high-fat diets, and work from Chi Chen as well as Ali Randa showed different types of things when you have different types of diets, and how that affects. And actually, Chi Chen's work shows that there's actually the DNMT2 that is active and conferring methylation on these small tRNA fragments. But yes, diet is something that can be considered. I don't think diet is something we can do standalone, but we certainly can consider that.
Well, that's what I was thinking, an interaction between the diet and other environmental exposures.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We're supporting things like that now.
So I think this has been good conversation. In the interest of time, I would like to request a motion to approve this concept from Tim and seconded by Irva. And if council members could please vote in the electronic council book. I think Liz can clarify, but I think it's just the concept, right? They're voting on the concept itself. Yep.
Excellent presentation and an excellent.
Just a quick comment that I'll make is I wish my thesis advisor were still alive to appreciate where we are today. So in the late 1970s, early 1980s, he made this observation that there are these strange methylated adenines in messenger RNA. He really wanted to test whether or not they had any biological significance. So it's, that was all part of the discussions in the lab when I was a graduate student. So it's just, I wish you were around today to realize where we are. So.
On that note, so we have quorum on the concept. So what you're voting on is the concept, and please go ahead and do that. But we're going to move on to our second concept, which is going to be a tag team of actually 3 separate programs that are supported by our worker training program. So we're going to have the staff of WTP tag teaming this, starting with Sharon, and I'll let you introduce the others as we go through.
All right, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to share the 3 renewals for the worker training program. As you can see, it's our hazardous waste worker training program, our U45, which is the core of what we do. our hazmat training at DOE, our nuclear weapons complex, which is another cooperative agreement, UH4, and then our worker training, SBIR e-learning for hazmat, which is our R4344. I am the chief and director for the worker training program. I'm also presenting with me today are our staff members, Jim Remington, our program analyst, Eric Basad and Kathy Allmark, our health specialists, and then we also have online Gary Johnson, who is our industrial hygienist. We will be giving 2 separate presentations, but we'll be voting on one for the entire concept at the end when we move forward. So as this is September, National Preparedness Month, the concept renewals brings to attention the impact and the need to prepare for future disasters. And a lot of the work that we've been doing here in the worker training program has just been that. Wanted to share with you the worker training program funds nonprofit organizations with a demonstrated track record providing high quality occupational safety and health training to workers involved in handling hazardous materials or responding to emergency releases and hazardous materials. We currently have 17 grantees that represent a large number of other supporting organizations, over 100 nonprofit safety and health training organizations, and we provide training in all 50 states, Washington, D.C., and U.S. territories. So our reach is broad across all of the different groups, and we have really tried to expand over the years to make sure we look at more vulnerable populations and at-risk populations and working with tribal and those people who are responding to disasters. And so what we're trying to do is to look at this particular concept to expand what we're doing across the work here at NAEHS. As you know, we are funded separately through the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act, and we get funding separately from the Interior appropriation. This is a program that's funded between the Superfund Research Program and the Worker Training Program. What I think is important for us to do is that this particular program really focuses on addressing the variety of sites that may pose risk for health and safety concern to workers in the surrounding communities. There are several different things that we do, and we coordinate these activities along with our Superfund Research Branch, and we really try to partner and look at how we can look at the translational material that comes out of our Superfund research and utilize it in what we do. And so we do have a partnership with the Superfund Research Program. So these are the funding mechanisms and program areas that we're going to cover here today. One of the things I think is so important about what we do under this program, we have a core program under our U45, which is a hazardous waste worker training program. That program focuses on training workers and educating them in dealing with all the areas of hazardous materials. But for that core U45 program, every applicant must apply for the core program, which is a hazardous waste. Then they have 2 optional components that they can apply for, the hazmat disaster and the environmental career. And then under the U45, it's another cooperative agreement mechanism that's separate that we put out and work in collaboration with DOE, and then we'll also cover a little bit more about our small business program. So in general, what we do under the worker training program is to really focus on training those individuals who are having any type of impact dealing with either workplace issues, responding to disasters, and then also looking at how do we develop tools and resources to help this target population. We've trained nearly 5 million workers since we started this program in '87, and we're helping businesses and municipalities keep work sites and communities safer. These partnerships are essential. We work in collaboration with our grantee community to develop tools and resources and training. We address any particular impact that come out as far as response to disasters and emergency response. And as you can see here, we responded to several natural and non-made disasters over the years, including our work with the World Trade Centers, Western wildfires, hurricanes, Sandy and Harvey that's mentioned here, and then some of other unique things that we've responded to in the past, which is our Deepwater Horizons oil spill, and the work that we've done in the last 10 years dealing with Ebola and COVID-19, which we received around $20 million since 2015 to expand the work that we're doing on infectious disease around workers. The other program that we have is our Environmental Career Worker Training Program, which focuses on providing workforce development and job placement for underemployed or unemployed individuals. And this is a program that we started back in 1994, and we've trained approximately 14,000 individuals in 30 communities and sustained a 70% job placement rate. And I think lastly, one of the things that's important is that we try to coordinate all these activities through the use of our national clearinghouse and providing all these tools and resources and sharing what we're doing across the board. Here is the general funding for the programs that we've had, and of course, based on the appropriations, it fluctuates. But for FY23, this is the funding that we had. Rick shared that information with you earlier, but we were able to increase some of our funding under the Environmental Career Worker Training Program because that's a primary focus now, dealing with EJ and Justice 40. We'll share a little bit about how we've been identified as a pilot there. We've also increased the funding going to our hazmat disaster based on the number of disasters and activities that we've been involved in and engaged in, and of course the appropriations for the SBIR as a percentage, and then we receive around $9.3 million to do the training under our Department of Energy through our cooperative agreement and memorandum of standard for that particular program. What I think is unique in reference to what we do under worker training is that we received numerous special appropriations for disasters and emergencies over the years. And as you can see, we've, over the past 25 years, we received $20 million in emergency appropriations to support various disasters and responses. And we just recently received $2.5 million to fund through the Consolidated Appropriations Act disasters that occurred in FY22 and dealing with everything from wildfires to hurricanes to tornadoes. And so the varied portfolio of activities and training that's developed under our grantees really helps us to be able to put these supplements out, get folks working already, because many of the communities that are impacted were already getting training from our existing grantees. What this allows us to do is to expand our reach and train more and actually focus on recovery efforts, and then also prepare for additional storms, because we know several of these communities continue to be impacted over and over again. So what we try to do is to work with those existing partnerships to make sure that we're providing them with everything that they need to be able to move forward. So here is a training of, as you can see, the reach that we have under this program. We train people in mostly all of the states. As you can see, for 2022, there's not only a couple of states that we didn't reach here, but I can say from other programs, maybe the DOE, we probably reached all of these folks. Around 113,000 workers under our hazardous waste worker training program, and around 25,000 for our hazmat disaster. And what I think is actually unique in reference to how we're able to do this is that the consortiums that are developed with those 100 different organizations that they work with, they're able to move from state to state and site to site to really focus on doing training, because we have a lot of mobile units that go out and do training in certain areas, especially our reach to tribal organizations. For example, Alabama Fire Colleges takes their mobile resources to various different tribes in the West and up north, and we've heard a little bit about that in some of our lectures that we've done recently with the Keystone Lecture with Kenny Oldfield. And so one of the things I think is also important that we share is that we work on several different federal agencies and working groups with the activities that we've done here. Jim will share a little bit more about how we engaged to our National Response Framework, the National Contingency Plan, and how we're actually indemnified to do response activities if it is an emergency. And so we work, if we're deployed, to do those types of activities. And so we work through all these different groups and activities to make sure that we're understanding what's happening right now in reference to what's happening in the wildfires and the recovery in Maui and the different types of activities. So we are hearing what's happening. We're in those hot wash activities and discussions after these types of things to see how we can better deploy our resources and activities across what we're doing. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jim Remington so he can share a little bit more about our training programs.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I just want to emphasize, as Sharon mentioned early on when she did the overview of the program, that it is a cooperative agreement, and this program couldn't be where it is without it being a cooperative agreement. And we interact with our grantees through these various mechanisms. We have our technical workshops they actually plan it for us. They come up with the ideas. We work with them to kind of structure it. But it's a way for us to exchange our guidance that we receive and what their organization would like to focus on as far as hazardous materials go. So this is just a couple of that we held. We're going to have one this October here. And it's funny, we were talking about AI yesterday, but one of the topics is going to be emerging threats, emerging technologies, AI, how that impacts the workers, from a health and safety perspective. So it was all very timely for what we're going to be doing this next month, actually. We have actually done webinars. As you've seen with the severe weather, we got urban flooding, where it was something that was not normally seen when you go up to New York with Sandy and things like that, with the water impacting some of those areas. It just sets up different hazards that they weren't used to before. What's shown here also is our wildfire urban interface, which happened in Maui. We had to relook at that and see what other hazards were occurring as a result of wildfires impacting urban areas and the chemicals and the mixtures and all the things that it entails. So I'm going to focus on two of the programs, the Hazardous Waste Worker Training Program and the Hazmat Disaster Training Program. And then I'll turn it over to Eric and Sharon for the Environmental Career Worker Training Program. So as Sharon mentioned, this is a core program, the Hazardous Waste Worker Training Program. And we've trained, we've done 39 million contact hours. That is a number of hours for the course times the number of people who've taken the course. So that's quite a number. Almost 5 million workers trained under that program. And as Sharon mentioned, there's 17 grantee consortiums with about $19 million to fund that program. And I just took little snapshots of some of the successes of the program. This was between OAI, which is our prime grantee, with one of their partners, Mendez Environmental. So OAI is located in Chicago, Mendez Environmental is located in Louisiana, and that partnership allowed them to reach some of these workers. And Mendez, a specialty, they do also training in Spanish as well. So just a snapshot of that. Another one is PETE. It's the Partnership for Environmental Training and Education, Technology and Education, and the Community College Consortiums, and the firefighters. And Sharon mentioned our partnership with our sister branch. The PFAS and the PFOAs that came out, they're impacting our grantees as well. So with the Community College Consortium, they're working with the Environmental Department up in Maine, dealing with dairy farms and wildlife and the bioaccumulation of that. The firefighters, as you know, between the AFFF foam and their turnout gear, they're doing their own studies now to figure out how to address this with their population. And then with the CPWR, the Center for Construction Research Training, they had to do some additional training when they've had, so we're at a time now where materials is really expensive. There's a lot of deconstructing, reconstructing, reuse of materials. But when you have hazards like hydrofluoric acid that were built into some of this deconstruction, they had to get additional training. So they went to work on that. So that's our basic hazardous waste worker training program. I'm not going to go into our hazmat disaster training program. That came about after the World Trade Center, when you had all these workers on the pile, the exposures to some of those mixtures, the enforcement of wearing respirators. So when that program came out, we dedicated a portion of funds for that. And since then, we've trained over almost 250,000 workers. We currently have 14 grantees who have this program within their grant, and they get about 3.5 million a year. I know we all talked about climate change and severe weather. Well, we look at it from the perspective of how it's impacting our workers. you know, we've been dealing with this with farmers, outdoor workers. They've been dealing with heat stress and that kind of things, but it's just gotten more severe. Now we're also looking at insect vectors and all things like that. But along with that comes severe weather. So it's just, everything's kind of ramping up. Sharon mentioned that we are part of the National Response Framework. For those of you not familiar with the National Response Framework, it's a FEMA led for Stafford Act disasters. We are part of the Health and Safety Coordination Group with OSHA and NAEHS. We're also part of the National Disaster Recovery Framework that's under HHS, and the National Contingency Plan that deals with spills. So that's the National Response Team with EPA, Coast Guard, and those folks. So we're in all of these plans. The issue is just getting out there at the right time to address the right needs. But when we do go out, we're looking at worker responders, cleanup workers, the folks that have the highest potential of being exposed to hazards, whether it's physical hazards, chemical hazards. And we're also looking at day laborers. You know, the folks that go out there who may not get the training, they may not get the PPE. So we really want to make sure they get the information as well. After Sandy, we got more involved with small businesses and communities and even residents, just because, as you know, they can't hire contractors, so they're kind of doing the work themselves, or they're hiring day laborers. So we want to reach out as far as possible to make everybody safe. I also want to mention our partnership with the Disaster Research Response. So when we say we care about all the health and safety for the workers going in disasters, it includes the researchers who have to go in those areas as well to collect their data. We've actually just developed a training tool on protecting the researchers. It can be downloaded, they can take it and use it for their own good. We have trainers who can provide it as well. We've created deployment guides, basically checklists of what researchers should think about before they go in the field. And that all came about as a result of our participation with the DR2 program. These are just, again, snapshots of some of the things we've done with different disasters. The top one with Deep South Center, they have a strong relationship with a lot of faith-based groups in Louisiana, Florida, Alabama. And then we have the Western Regions University with UCLA. They work with emergency responders, community-based organizations, day laborers. And then we also in OAI, they trained summer responders for tornadoes and flooding in Kentucky. All of this is, we are trying to reach everybody as possible, knowing that there's a lot of at-risk populations. When Sharon showed the COVID funding, a lot of that funding was also used to partner with community groups. So not only to deal with, you know, vaccines or masking and things like that, but also to connect them up with other partners who can also provide some assistance. So environmental justice, vulnerable populations, those are all things that we contribute to. Other partnerships, this is with our Community College Consortium. They partner with Passstone, they're a nonprofit nationally, but also in Puerto Rico. They're gonna be doing training down there. Colorado Baptist Disaster Relief, they actually were going out to Maui to do some work, but our grantee utilizes them for their instructors to get like experience. They will partner with them, go out in the field with them, so they'll get real experience in responding to disasters. We try to stay on top of the needs of our grantees. So we create new materials. We update materials. I talked about the wildfire tool, urban flooding. It's our National Clearinghouse for Worker Safety and Health. They are our repository for the training material. They also get subject matter experts to help us develop this material. They also help with coordinating with our other federal partners as we do as well. But they are where we keep everything that's open, available to the public, as well as our grantees. So I can't overstate the importance of having that clearinghouse and what it provides to us. So now I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Eric Persson, the newest member of our group.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's with great privilege and pleasure that I get to talk to you all about the Environmental Career Worker Training Program. This is a program that aims to deliver pre-employment and life skills training to disadvantaged communities so that individuals can attain sustainable careers in environmental cleanup and emergency response. And since 1995, 14,021 individuals have been trained through the program and have had their lives changed. In this year, 2022, we saw 512 folks also graduate. So across 6 grantees, we've seen an employment rate, a job placement rate of 70%, and matching that in 2022 at 71%. And as we look at, celebrate essentially over 28 years of successful training and empowerment of individuals through this program to reach these underserved, unemployed, and underemployed individuals across over 30 communities and over 200 community-based organizations. As one grantee would like to say, our secret sauce of success has been the basic life skills and job training component. And over the next 5 years, we aim to deliver and improve upon our exceptional training, resources, and tools, such as our excellent counseling and mentoring program, the graduation opportunities for folks to get jobs in construction and green jobs, for example, and these basic life skills that help enrich and trainees' lives. And the Environmental Career Worker Training Program has been recognized for its strong job and track record and economic benefit, and has been able to address multiple presidential and executive orders and mandates, and was selected as one of the 13 pilot programs in the Justice 40 initiative. And this is an initiative that aims to deliver 40% of overall benefits from federal investments to disadvantaged communities. And why was this program so successful? So in 2015, we conducted an economic evaluation of the Environmental Career Worker Training Program, looking at the years from 95 to 2013, and found that for every $3.5 million of federal investment annually, there was a $100 million return on investment. So if you look at all those years combined, that is a total of $1.79 billion on return on investment. And we go a step further, because life isn't about income, right? It's so much more. And if you look at these qualitative analyses that we've conducted, including this year, which also includes an updated economic evaluation, we find that the program helps to, once again, enrich trainees' lives, provide partnerships, which are critical to the component of the program, and provide intangible benefits. For example, giving back to their community, building and sustaining a life after on and underemployment, being formerly incarcerated, being homeless, and for finding ways towards leadership. For example, one of our trainees became a mayor, right? And we receive numerous success stories every year. We have this progress report every year, and we get stories. For example, Mr. Abels, who has a reading disorder and at the time no technical education, was able to get a job in commercial truck driving and his GED. And then there's Ms. Graves, who became a licensed mold remediation contractor following Hurricane Ida in Louisiana. And she started her own business in partnership with an environmental career grantee, and has been leading in the outreach, the mentorship, the ultimately employment of women in mold remediation services. And we tried to document throughout the U45s our successes. So we've celebrated the 25-year commitment to environmental justice and summarized many of our successes through the Environmental Career Worker Training Program. We've also talked about how training could help overcome disaster gaps by providing on-the-ground resources and knowledge and partnerships through the program, and how the worker training program's training has helped to overcome disaster response barriers. And we've also looked at the historical capacity building of infectious disease response since the 90s and all the way up to COVID-19, and how the program has been better prepared throughout each step on disaster, building on itself so that we could better respond to the next disaster. So I'm just going to turn it back over to Sharon Beard to talk about some of our next steps. Thank you.
So as we look forward with the worker training program, here are some of our existing priorities that we're going to expand upon to continue our work with an all hazards approach. That means looking at any emerging threats and training that we know of, known, emerging, unknown, and other different types of specific disasters that come out. We're going to continue our activities with our infectious disease program, because we have no idea what the next infectious disease outbreak is going to be. So we're going to take those lessons learned that we learned with COVID and also with Ebola to make sure that we're able to adapt and use additional models and activities. That's a lot of things that's based on our pathogen safety data, training materials that we've developed over the years. We're going to continue our outreach looking at Justice 40 and expanding the work that we're doing under the Environmental Career Worker Training Program. And one of the analysis that we've just finished doing is showing how we've been able to meet all of the criteria that's been put out in reference to how to engage and utilize all the tools that has been developed under the White House with the CGS tool, the Environmental Justice Index, to show that all of the training programs that we have, that 100% of those individuals and those training communities meet the guidance that's been put out there. We want to be able to adapt and to develop innovative methods to respond to future training needs. And so that's where we bring in folks at our different technical workshops to talk about how we can respond more appropriately to different types of wildfires and other types of disasters. And we want to look at evaluation and expanding our partnerships across all of our programs. So these are some of the other priorities that we have looked at or that have come up over the years. And I think what is important is that we continue to do this. One of the things that we were identified to do is under the National Academies of Sciences, the Engineering and Medicine framework. They said that we really need to look at protecting workers and public from inhalation hazards, and they've instructed us to help reinforce the needs of workers, including members of the most vulnerable populations facing inhalation hazards. And that's why we've expanded our outreach to organizations like the national organizations that respond to disasters in other vulnerable communities, and some of the partnerships that Jim mentioned about Pathstones and Southern Baptist. We want to look at making sure that we're developing those tools to address some of the issues with inhalation hazards. And a part of what we do with the National Response Framework is that one of the areas is making sure that we provide them with adequate training on how to use personal protective equipment, not just N95, but the whole spectrum based on their activities and what they engaged in. We've tried to also look at some of the responses that we got from council the last time to try to expand the base of who we're training under our program. And we've done that through a myriad of different types of activities. So, but the main focus has been to expand our consortium. So we have 17 groups, but over 100 different organizations. So each year, especially when we've gotten these emergency appropriations, we've been able to expand the number of communities and partnerships that have been developed under those appropriations. And so we hope to be able to expand that and do more of it in this next round. And of course, dealing with the other climate change and other disaster and resilience programs is something that we're certainly looking at. And we're also going to try to make sure that we incorporate anything that comes out of the new strategic plan for NAEHS. We've kind of put a halt to our development of our strategic plan to see what's coming up with that so that we can incorporate everything to that. So we hopefully before the end of this year, we'll be able to have a strategic plan that we have developed for our program. And of course, we want to expand the work that we're doing with environmental justice. I'm currently on several different working groups within the White House Environmental Justice Interagency Council, and we're trying to work to expand what we're doing under Executive Order 14096 to look at some of the work that we're doing on environmental justice and national disasters, because I'm also leading that work group and trying to expand to get work done there and to incorporate everything that we've learned with disasters and how to respond appropriately there, and we will continue those activities. Since we're going to go and continue on, we want to finish our next concept clearance and then we'll go back and move forward. So if we can go to the next presentation. I'm going to now switch gears and talk about the our other cooperative agreement, which is our nuclear worker training program. This concept is really focusing on the collaborations and the work that we've done over the years to establish training in partnership with the Department of Energy to address all the workers at those particular sites. So we've just celebrated a big milestone for our program, 30 years of training working in collaboration with the Office of Environmental Management and the Department of Energy. And we got involved and we were authorized by Section 3131 of the National Defense Authorization Act. And we've developed an interagency agreement with the Department of Energy Office of Environmental Management. And over those years, we've really focused on doing a partnership that helps prepare and equip workers and develop necessary training to safely address hazards in and around DOE sites while encouraging collaborations. One of the biggest focuses for this program is really using worker trainers as workplace experts. As you know, working at a Department of Energy site, the hazards are varied. And so what we've tried to do is to work with the existing workers. So if they're a carpenter or if they're a electrical worker or electrician, we utilize those worker trainers who had experience in the field working at DOE sites and understand those hazards and bring them into the training world so that they can then train those workers who are going to be engaged in doing that work, because it's ever evolving with the different types of technologies and the decommissioning that's going on at those sites. Since we started this program, we've had more than 9.3 million contact hours and trained over 720,000 workers. And we currently have 7 grantees who are doing this work. And we provide around $9 million for the work that's going on there. So we currently have those 7 grantees who are doing the training there. And I think what is interesting is that we do provide training in 31 states across. And so what we do is really focusing on preparing workers who are going to be either employed or, at the site, are already there or will be employed. So we really have to broaden the training that we do, because a lot of our grantees work on individuals who might be training to go into work at those particular sites. And the bulk of the training that we've done with these 7 grantees has done mostly at 6 different sites: the Hanford site, Oak Ridge site, the Los Alamos site, and Portsmouth gaseous diffusers plant. And overall, our grantees have done training at 27 different Department of Energy sites. I want to give you a couple of highlights on some of the training programs that we've engaged with over the years. The biggest one is at the Hammer facility at Hanford. This particular partnership really was tasked with site cleanup of solid and liquid wastes from weapons production's another Manhattan project site. This is the most contaminated Department of Energy site. They're doing some of the most, I think, innovative and different types of ways of cleaning up those sites, from anything from vitrification, taking the high-level waste, to glass. And we have several of our grantees who are working with signatory contractors to train up all I think around 3,000 new workers that have just been employed or are going to be employed over the next couple of years to deal with that particular site. And this training is really being done in partnership with the Vopentest Hammer Federal Training Center. And we've been in partnership ever since they started that program 25 years ago. And we are part of the steering committee to work with them to develop appropriate tools and training. And we are delighted to continue to do that work. And as you know, 30% of the workers that are trained at Hanford are trained under our training program. Another thing I want to highlight quickly is that each year we get different requests from the Department of Energy to train and help them develop a cadre of workers to do different types of things. So one of the areas that they enlisted us to do is the radiological control technician training. So we're actually training our folks to do train-the-training, and we've done several pilots over the years. We've done Portsmouth and Paducah sites February in 2023, and now we're actually training individuals recently now at I think was Pantex and Oak Ridge, to train federal workers who are engaged in working in dealing with radiological control type activities and looking at routine monitoring of potential contamination at sites to help workers and communities prepare for this hazard. They have to prepare for an exam, and so we've just grabbed the resources that we have specifically under the United Steelworkers, the Tony Mazzocchi Center. I think 2 or 3 of their trainers have more than 20 years of experience doing this type of work, and so they're now going to train other trainers to be able to do this across the DOE complex to meet the need of the number of workers that are going to need to have happen. So just in the one training that we did with Paducah and Portsmouth, they've been able to graduate 18 candidates to start working, and we hope to be able to expand the work that we're doing there. So moving forward with our DOE, we're going to do some of the same things that we wanted to do across our U45 program. We want to establish more relationships with our contractors and contractor safety. We have a subject matter expert that's been working with all of the DOE contractors to understand what the additional hazards are and the change in workforce so that we can develop training that's appropriate there. And we're utilizing our National Clearinghouse to make that happen and to develop an additional training tools and activities that we're going to do. We're going to focus on the priorities for DOE, which is continuous learning, integrated safety management, safety culture, and just improving task readiness at DOE. We're going to continue to work on, I think, a big project that we do with our National Training Center out of the DOE in Albuquerque is the issue of through standardization and reciprocity of training. One of the things that we saw was a big issue over the years is that an individual can move from site to site and have to take core training over and over and over again. That was just completely redundant. So we worked with them back in the early years, around 2003 to 2005, to develop a reciprocity project. So therefore, the training that we've developed under our program, if they get trained at Paducah, then they can move and go to Portsmouth, and then they can go to the Hanford site, and they don't have to take this training over and over again. But we had to go through a thorough review of all the curriculum and activities and make sure that it met the DOE standards and orders, and then also make sure that it's the site-specific training that's being developed. And so now mostly all of our grantees only have to focus on tweaking their training, looking at site-specific areas. And so that's been a great project that we've been able to do over the years. And then that reciprocity is something that we're going to continue to do across what we're doing. And we're seeing a lot of new challenges and trying to look at the different changes that are happening right now. Another success story is dealing with the electrical workers and the training that has been coming out with the national standard 70E. The Idaho National Lab said that they needed to train over 400 electrical workers to come in and do major work that's going on. We already had a training program, Center for Construction Research and Training, that had an apprenticeship program nearby, so they were able to take their trainers to come in and offer all the electrical workers the certification training. And so that was a cost savings for DOE of $100,000 just in that 1 year of the training those additional workers that they didn't have to provide those activities to. And overall, we're going to use some of the same things, focus on our environmental justice efforts at the DOE. We want to also make sure that we're looking at some of the other areas that we think that we can work more collaborative with DOE on, looking at alternative energy. As you know, we're dealing with a lot of those particular issues, and one of the biggest hazards to firefighters and those folks who are responding to a lot of electrical vehicles is the additional hazards if they catch on fire. One of the things that we were talking about with one of the experts that was looking at this, they was like, why in the world are we putting all these electrical chargers in parking decks? Nobody thinks about it. You can't get a fire truck in a parking deck. You just can't. And so if you actually have a fire down there, it's gonna go from car to car to car, and you can't get the fire trucks in there. And so they're already right now isolating those vehicles and just letting them burn, because if you don't catch them early enough, you cannot stop the fire. And so we're looking at how do we do this, and how do we do it with working with the expert that we know we have at DOE, and to be able to do that. So I'm going to stop there in reference to DOE. I can keep going because a lot of great projects and initiatives that we're doing there, but I want to be able to get going with some of our other programs. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Allmark and also to Eric to talk about our SBIR, and then we'll finish up. Thank you.
So thank you for your attention. We're almost done, so we're on the downslope here. I want to talk about the WTP Small Business Innovation Program that is a congressionally mandated program that is designed to fit the unique mission of the NAEHS WTP program. We develop a yearly Notice of Funding Opportunity announcement to further the development of technology-enhanced training products for the safety and health training of a variety of workers. And the training is provided to workers in various occupational sectors, as you can see here. The goal of this program is to further the development of the technology-enhanced training programs defined by WTP to include but not be limited to the support of training through various venues, such as online training, mobile device training, virtual reality, and serious gaming for various sectors of the hazardous materials cleanup community. WTP SBIR recipients are also encouraged to partner with the WTP main-funded U45 organizations that you heard about earlier in the development of their training products. There are three main areas of the WTP SBIR program. E-teaching focuses on assisting trainers and instructors in developing and delivering health safety training in a number of environments, ranging from classrooms to remote learning centers. Potential products include assistance for peer trainers or worker trainers, and also assistance with literacy or training, other training cultural differences. And they also support small group activities in the training of different methodologies. E-learning involves technology deployment to provide individualized or small group-based training in learning centers or in a technology-enabled smart classroom or to a learner's desktop or laptop or even mobile phone. The last area supports the safety and health training of disaster preparedness and response workers exposed to hazards from a variety of disasters such as hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, oil spills, infectious disease, wildfires, terrorist attacks, response resiliency training, and even health and safety training in preparing for emerging industries and technologies. The future of the program will support e-learning product development for the training of underserved, vulnerable workers and disadvantaged, underemployed workers that are part of the ECWTP program, which is a unique and successful model for the workforce development in environmental remediation, green industry, and construction jobs. Efforts to promote the Justice 40 activities of the ECWT around green energy and sustainable jobs is a particular focus. And we will encourage products that promote or assist in helping to provide benefits and services to trainees, their partners, and the community. WTP will also consider technology-enhanced safety and health training products that will help in emerging industries in technologies such as climate change, disaster and resiliency, environmental justice, and alternative energy. The WTP SBIR program has supported 89 grantees since its inception in 1997. There are currently 6 grantees, and we supported them with just under $700,000 in FY23. Now, we are such a unique and small program that we have to limit our funding. Our phase ones can only be paid at $100,000 per year for 1 year. Our phase twos can only be paid at $200,000 per year for a total of 2 years. And these technologies that are developed aid in the broader mission of the NIH WTP to prevent work-related harm by providing training for emergency responders, skilled support personnel, and workers involved in cleanup, removal, and containment of hazardous materials. Proper training can mean the difference between life and death for workers that handle hazardous materials or respond to man-made or natural disasters. The WTP has had multiple successes. Two of the biggest accomplishments include a Telly Award, which recognizes excellence in educational media, and that was won by Metamedia in 2006, and the Adobe Max Award, which is a global awards program that recognizes the best uses of Adobe software for creating engaging experiences, and that was won by Amethyst Research, which is now Equipment Solutions, in 2009. Another success story is the work of Cell Podium. In 2020, they developed and deployed a COVID-19 worker safety module through a learning management system for a module refresher training for clients to configure their own campaigns and share content with other clients through a cell phone-based medium. And they developed 70 of these workers modules. Now, Cell Podium's first grant with WTP was back in 2006. And they've had several, and they've had patents they've developed. They've also had multiple white papers that were written under this program. During COVID-19, NXL was working with guidance from experts from our WTP U45 grant recipient, the Prevention, Preparedness, and Response Consortium from the University of Texas, and they developed a risk policy train portal to assist business owners in reducing the risk of COVID-19 in their workplaces. This portal provides a virtual solution for businesses to identify and mitigate risks and develop policies and communicate these policies to their employees. And NXL has also had several grants with us and has developed multiple technologies for the WTP. WTP SBIR grant recipients have also implemented cutting-edge technologies, such as augmented reality and virtual reality, cloud-based computing, and big data algorithms into their learning platforms. While AR, which is the augmented reality, allows the user to experience computer-generated images overlaid on top of real-world environment, the VR allows the user to experience a completely simulated environment. In 2021, Titronic Software developed a virtual reality training platform to immerse the responders into this realistic hazmat emergency response scenarios. They use this VR simulation to train first responders, and we're able to publish a white paper in the Journal of Emergency Medical Services describing the use of this developed training. For the last couple of slides, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Prasad.
Hey everyone. So we got to do something fun last year. We're allowed to do fun things every once in a while. We did an evaluation of the WTP SBIR program, and we summarized some of those findings in this fact sheet. And the fact sheet talks about how worker training has been impacted in various occupational sectors through the WTP SBIR program, and how it's provided opportunities for commercialization, patents, job creation, and partnerships with businesses and other institutions. And when we did this evaluation, we did it through surveys and interviews, and we found that it had resulted in improved and contributed use of technology in worker training to keep workers safe doing hazardous material work. And we've determined this based on its ability to, once again, provide commercialization of the product, create these jobs, and provide a unique sense of collaboration that's not very common in other SBIR programs, where other grantees, say in the U45, were able to partner and work with the SBIR WT grantees and use information together to help refine, test, and ultimately improve the product of technology that they were developing. We also provide unique opportunities and platforms for folks to come together, not just the WTP grantees, but the broader occupational health and safety training community and greater public health community to look at these materials, look at these resources, and work together with the SBIR grantees. And we aim, based on our evaluation, to promote and make more awareness to more diverse audiences. As we all are aware, SBIR has some challenges in diversity. And for example, we're going to be talking at the Historically Black Colleges University Climate Change Conference next month. And we're going to be talking about the SBIR as well as part of that conversation. To continue offering these opportunities for collaboration. One of the evaluation goals was to make this fact sheet, but we also have a larger summarizing report that goes into greater depth. And we're continuing to present at different conferences and meetings. We'll also be talking at APHA in November, specifically about the WTP SBIR program. So I just wanted to acknowledge, we want to acknowledge Drs. Hood, Hornbuckle, and Penning, and open it up for questioning. Thank you.
We've covered a lot, all three of our main programs, and I hope we were able to give you just a taste of some of the activities that we're involved in, and we really want to hear from our reviewers to give us more guidance or ask us any questions in reference to these activities.
Well, thank you very much, Sharon. Dr. Beard, I was just honored. Oh, I'm sorry, everyone's looking at me. I'm a deer in headlights. So
She wasn't the light for me, but go ahead, Darryl.
Oh, okay. Yes.
All right.
You know, you look down here. So, yeah, you know, this has grounded me, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to sit in on this concept. Really has grounded me and demonstrated to me, at least again, sort of given me some principles. And I've always known that, you know, with the reemergence of infectious disease, as well as the schema that we'll be experiencing from climate change related to catastrophes, disasters, natural and the like, is very, very important. And while we are talking about AI and machine learning and how that's going to contribute to replacing jobs such as these in the future, not so fast, not so fast. And so while that may happen somewhere down the line, certainly for the next decade or so, we need to be focused on your ability to continue to, NIEHS's ability to continue to contribute to helping these programs exist. Very important. So I was just overwhelmed by what I saw. Now, yes, I would like to see a little bit more about, instead of supporting Justice 40, we, Dr. Beard and I had a conversation about that offline. And so, yes, I'd like to see a little bit more there. But other than that, I think you're doing a great job. Of course, put the pedal to the metal, and I'd like to see this come to fruition.
All right. Well, we're going to take that challenge. We continue to do a lot of work with environmental justice, and so we're going to make sure that we incorporate more of the concepts that I think have already been happening under all of our grantees to just expand it and try to get more of our folks to be in doing that type of work. So, who's next?
Oh, thanks. I really applaud your work. Amazing, and I'm really was heartened to hear that you're working with day laborers as well, and you just have so many different programs on training. And I just wanted a little clarification. Do the grants and your work also cover equipment?
Yes, a lot of the materials that are being developed really look at how to use and engage and do different types of technology and personal protective equipment. So we've definitely done that across what we do. And it depends on what the area of concern is. So example, if we're doing work dealing with urban flooding and the unique hazards there, we might be looking at how to use appropriate sump pumps and systems and tools and things like that, and how to make sure that the workers who engage in that activity is doing it, making sure that they know the different types of respiratory protection that they would need in those types of environments.
But I'm sorry, to clarify, what I mean is, do you ever provide equipment like respirators and like for day laborers?
Well, one of the
You know,
things that
like-
we try to, when we're doing our training,
Yes.
and if we're actually doing training with those folks and they have a need for some of that training and materials, we do provide that to them, especially if we're doing deployment and we're actually involved and engaged. I remember when we went down after Hurricane Harvey, one of the things that we did was we saw a big need of working with day laborers down there. So we developed training that was done in Spanish, and as a result of them taking the training, they were able to take home with them a package of different types of personal protective equipment, from respirators to Tyvacs to all the different types of things that they would be needing to do muck and gut type of work dealing with Hurricane Harvey. So we do provide them with those resources. What we also try to do is to make sure that they make the connection to the other organizations who have those resources, because we focus on actually giving out the material to those folks that we train. So we do a lot of those toolbox sessions, but it's also important to make sure that they know that there are other resources that are out there to make that happen.
Thanks so much.
Dr. Penny?
Hi, this is a very impressive program. You've accomplished an awful lot, and actually would say perhaps little money. You know, I'd like to remind the council that, you know, your funding isn't necessarily coming directly from NAEHS. It's coming from Sarah, and therefore from the Department of the Interior and also Department of Energy. And what we've seen in the budget projections that Dr. Wojcik presented earlier, the Superfund research program from which some of the worker training program is supported is flat. And I think you have such important metrics here that this needs to be put in front of Congress, because what we're going to be seeing moving forward is an increase in need of the worker training program, not less. And you already see that in the additional supplements you've been given. Those supplements have been given to you in a reactive way. Here's a problem, here's some more money. What about being proactive? Not necessarily you particularly, but Congress, in actually thinking that these disasters are going to continue. You have one almost every week now. And you know, you have limited resources and you've accomplished an awful lot. So there's some opening comments to be.
Actually, can I just comment to this? I remain astonished that they are not more supportive of this program. So I think it seems like every 6 months or every quarter or so, I go before it's the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats. And when I talk about this program, there's just uniform sense of this is highly successful and it's spot on for addressing environmental justice and Justice 40. So, and then when we get the feedback, it comes in, you know, this year, you know, the House is proposing a pretty significant reduction. It's like, where is this coming from? And furthermore, the percentage increases in this program have never kept up with the labor HHS increases. I mean, last year, for FY23, we got about a 3.5% increase. And then, of course, we had the climate change and health on top of that. And the Superfund program was increased by, I think it was 0.34%. So it's not for lack of trying. I mean, we're in front of Congress, and I'm never getting anything but, you know, entirely positive, enthusiastic endorsement of this program. So I'm perplexed. So I don't know, is Gwen or anyone else? So Sharon, you've been a part of these briefings too. Is there something you think we could be doing differently to try to get our message across in a different way? I mean, the statistics for this program, the worker training program, are just, it knocks your socks off.
Right. Well, I mean, we've been having discussions about the issue of the transfer authority to get funding from other federal agencies who have, I think, been trying to partner with us for years. We've had to turn down these interagency agreements because, I think 3 years ago, the ability for us to get those transfer funds through interagency agreements lapsed. And so now when the EPA or the Department of Energy comes to us to work on a special project or initiative, we have to say no because we don't have that transfer authority anymore. So that has really hampered us. And so we've really had to really think outside the box and to make sure that whenever we know that there's some discussions about emergency appropriations, we let them know how we've been able to use the funds over the years and to do that great work. And so that's how I think we've been getting more monies through the emergency appropriations. But we've got to get that back established, because I think that, we've really calculated, along with, I think it was April Bennett, we've looked at over the last 3 years, almost $1 million that we had to turn down that could have been transferred to us, but either from the Department of Energy or from the EPA to work on special disasters and responses, like the work done in Puerto Rico, the work that we're doing with environmental justice, but we can't receive those monies.
And it's for unbelievably incomprehensible legalese, and it's amazing how the transfer of this money just gets caught up. So the Department of Energy wants to give it to us. Okay, the NIH, and this has gone to the highest level of NIH leadership. It's gone to our congressional liaison. Everyone wants this fixed, but somehow at the end of the year, it never gets fixed. So, and again, it's not for lack of trying on Sharon's part. I don't know what percentage of your time you actually spend on this, but it's just totally astonishing that I don't know what else we can be doing. So it's just incredible.
So one suggestion I have, and I don't know if you do this, is when you look at the Environmental Career Worker Training Program, which is providing underemployment for disadvantaged individuals, it's giving them new hope, new life. Any possibility of taking a few representatives of that program?
Sharon, do you want to speak to this?
So you said taking a few representatives.
Take a representative, someone who's actually trained in that program, and can you give an example?
I mean, I think we can certainly do that, and I think what is very interesting is the ones who've been able to take the training and then be able to either start their own businesses, able to really do additional type of works. And one of the things that we've seen in several of this is actually a pre-apprenticeship model. Now we're seeing across the board that at least 4 of our grantees have direct entry into apprenticeship programs, and those individuals were either homeless before, now are making $100,000 to $150,000 a year as master apprentices being carpentry and those type of work. So we have that great thing, and we've been trying to have that type of conversation. We actually had several senators who actually met with several of our graduates of our program to understand the type of impacts that's been going on, and we invite them to graduations and things like that. So we just maybe need to determine how to respond and be able to do something better.
I want to make sure that Carrie had an opportunity to comment on this as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I just wanted to first compliment you on your leadership of this program, Sharon. I mean, you gave us a lot of information during our review sessions, and today provided like an order of magnitude more, so that it is clear your success. I particularly wanted to note the success in serving disadvantaged communities, and although I hesitate to say you should add more information to your summary, the emphasis on serving directly disadvantaged communities and the impact on those disadvantaged communities is really an impressive part. And as a director of a Superfund Research Center, that part is particularly interesting to me, is the direct impact of NIH approaches to serving communities. And you really fit into a slot that otherwise is not so easy to fill. And so I say that from someone who does community engaged research. Really like your emphasis on serving disadvantaged communities.
Right. Well, I think it's all about our grantees. They've been doing this for years and working in communities, and they've just been able to utilize the funds and resources and the tools to be able to expand those relationships. And I have to say, like I said, the supplemental funding has really helped us to be able to expand that type of work. But we want to be able to incorporate it into the regular program and not have to focus on funding projects as a result of some of these supplements. So that's what we're really trying to work on, to be able to make that change. And it's something that has taken a long while, because I know when I first came here to NAEHS, one of the things that Dr. Olden asked us to do was to really look at doing community outreach cores in our centers. And so that's kind of how I started with it, and then also with the environmental career, doing that type of work. So we've just really been expanding those concepts across the board and what we're doing to make sure that we're making that happen. And I want to also be able to do that along with the NIH, to really look at how do we incorporate environmental justice and working with underserved populations across the board. And so I'm delighted to be able to do that type of work. And who do we have right here?
I think Andrew was first, then Janie, then Irva.
Okay.
Yeah, I asked this, I'm frightened because Carrie is sitting across from me, but what latitude do you have actually within the Superfund research program to make decisions about how you're distributing those funds? I mean, you've got research funds, you've got these funds that are going toward the workers program, and you're looking at supplements, but you do have a foundational.
Yeah, so it's zero sum between the Superfund research program and the worker training program.
Right.
I would have to talk with April and the budget folks to see what latitude we would have to rebalance between those two. Recognizing that there's an awful lot of really good work that happens in the Superfund research program as well as in this one. So I think having to choose between two fantastic programs in a zero sum game is not a great place to be.
And not enough money in the Superfund program either. So that's the challenge, is big time.
And actually, I guess, the Superfund tax has been, do you see anything from the restoration of the Superfund tax? Because there is.
No.
No, that doesn't feed into your program.
The increase in our appropriation last year was $495,000 across $83 million.
That's it.
Thank you.
Who's next?
I just have a question about, for the slide that you showed for the hazardous waste worker training program, it looks like Minnesota has tons of folks getting trained, and then maybe not as much across the country. And then the hazmat disaster preparedness training program, it looks like the state of New York. Do people come from other places to do those trainings at those countries? So those states. So it's a little. Because it kind of looks like the neighboring South Dakota has nobody.
Right. Well, one of the things that we do is with the consortium that we have, they tend to position trainings where they have the most number of folks that can do. So a lot of workers do travel across state lines to take the training as necessary. But we do training in North and South Dakota, and we've been doing a lot with the other tribal communities there. But because of COVID, a lot of that just stopped. And so now we're back and engaging and doing that type of work. So we hope to see a little bit more impact in those areas. And then also with the fracking industry and those type of things, we're seeing a whole lot more requests to do training in those areas. And so we are looking at that. But a lot of our training is maybe regional focused. And so people will go from states. And so one of the things that we can actually do, we can do an analysis, because we ask people to indicate where they take the training, and then also where they're coming from to take the training. So we know we have an influx of workers from multiple different states coming in to take our training. Right. Were there any more? I think there's one more.
Yeah. Hi, Sharon.
Hello.
I feel like this program, I don't know when I first heard about it, but it's many, many years ago. And I just remember thinking, it's kind of a small program in the beginning, but it is just astounding to see how, and then even just from maybe a year or two ago when you reported, this is just mushroomed in terms of the impact and the number of people affected. So I'm just reiterating what other people have said. But just congratulations. I'm in awe of what you've done. I want to ask you some questions, or sort of kind of, this adds a little bit to some of the issues brought up, but I had the opportunity to present, I've been thinking a lot about wildfires and obviously coming from California, this we have the sense that it used to be a great place to come to, and now people are leaving the state because of the wildfires and the air quality. and did some research on the, you know, what the issues are besides climate change, which of course is not something easy to intervene on, but the, you know, the health of the forests is really awful, and there's a lot of work that could be done cleaning up the forest floor, which has, you know, 2-3 feet deep of debris in most of the forested areas. And so I had the opportunity to go to the White House's wildfire commission on wildfire mitigation and management, and present a proposal under their category of workforce development for developing the core programs, which are, in fact, do that kind of work, but amplifying those, and just like core programs on steroids. In other words, let's really get, you know, the maybe 200, 300,000 people out there doing that work, and in, you know, probably 4 or 5 years, we would really see a change in our wildfire situation. So anyway, I had the opportunity to present it, and one of the challenges that the commissioners raised was they did not think that there would be enough people out there who would want to join these programs. Although there were other people who sort of agreed that, which I had put it forward as not only improving the wildfire situation, but for the mental health of our youth that feel very desperate about their futures and are extremely passionate about climate change, and that this would be a way to help reduce that, some of the angst and mental health that's going on in our youth is sort of, you know, two-pronged win-win. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that, and also, you know, their question about recruitment, and you know, and there was also discussion. Somebody was presenting something about incarcerated people as potential workforce, doing what you're actually doing,
right.
Bringing them in and training them, and or formerly incarcerated people.
Well, I think one of the things that we've been trying to work with the International Association of Firefighters, they actually received one of the supplements from this last appropriation, and they're actually going out to actually train either volunteer or other firefighters who need to have that training dealing with wildfire and wildland type of work. And maybe Jim can really share a little bit more about that, because he's the project officer on that one. But I'll be very interested to learn about what you've put into that core program and that commission, to learn more about that, and we can share that with our folks who are engaged in doing that type of work. And we also have a disaster hub that focuses on wildfires out of UCLA. I think Kevin Riley is the PI there, where he's been trying to bring in the firefighters, career firefighters in that area, to really look at how do we address and prepare, you know, community members on what they need to know before wildfires occur, and then also how to be able to evacuate and do whatever training and when they go in to clean up and do recovery. So we've been doing those type of efforts over the years, but we can certainly learn how to do more. I think the work that we've been doing also on the White House Environmental Justice Committee, looking at environmental justice and natural disasters. One of the town hall meetings that we did a couple of years back really focused on how do we work and work more with tribal communities, because they have controlled burn programs that have been very successful, and we would like to be able to replicate that and be able to work more with our populations to figure out how we can do that and do that more appropriately. And we've talked about how we might be able to do that. We're in the last, I think, hurdles of getting the report from those activities released by the White House, so that we can start implementing work with the different federal agencies, and then also sharing with the community who participated in doing that work. So hopefully we'll be able to engage and do more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, really, it's the native peoples of this country who actually know how to properly manage the forests. And you know, the tide is starting to turn, but there's a lot of older firefighters who just don't want to give up on the, you know, stop all fires at all costs. And,
exactly.
There's actually an organization, I don't know if it's national, but it's definitely in California, Prescribed Fire association or something that has been doing trainings, and I heard a webinar where a bunch of them were speakers, and they can't keep up with the demand. There's so many people who want to be trained in how to properly do controlled burns.
Burns.
So,
Great.
yeah, let's talk more.
All right.
Any more discussion on this concept? If not, may I ask for a motion to approve the concept?
I so move.
By Irva, second by Karen. And if council members would please vote in the ECB.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum on the vote. So Rick, if you would like to close us out.
Okay, well, this was an incredible meeting. So I want to thank all members of council, present and past. I know I got an email from Phil Bourne indicating how engaged the presentations and the discussions were yesterday. I think this is the best yet. So again, thank you all for the work that you've done and the time you spend with us. And so with three, I formally adjourn today's, or this presentation of council.
All right. Thank you all. Just a reminder that our next council meeting will be in a virtual Zoom format, February 12th and 13th of 2024.